Welcome to Grammar Lesson 9. This week we are going to focus on action verbs, looking specifically at whether the action verb is transitive or intransitive. Let's review first what an action verb is. An action verb is something that expresses either a physical or a mental action. Examples of physical action would be like to write, to describe, to sit, to receive, to arise, to go. Those are all action verbs. Compare that with mental action, which would be to remember. It's happening in your head. To think, to understand, to believe, to know. Those are all mental actions. Now, regardless of whether an action is mental or physical, it can either be transitive or intransitive. And before we even get into this lesson, I want you to look at these two words, transitive and intransitive. Notice the root word of both is trans. And you're going to study this later in a lesson for vocabulary. But trans means to pass through one substance to another. So if something is transitive, it means it passes through. If something is intransitive, it means it stops. It doesn't pass anywhere. And when we're talking about a transitive verb, the action is what's being passed through, transferred over, passed through. When we're talking about an intransitive, we're talking about the action stopping at the verb and bouncing back to the subject. So keep that in mind as we go into this lesson, that trans means to pass from one to the other. And when we're talking about transitive and intransitive verbs, we're talking about the passing of the action from the verb. So just keep that in mind. It will help you understand this a little better. So a transitive verb is a verb that expresses an action that is directed toward a person, a place, or a thing. The action expressed by a transitive verb passes from the doer, which is the subject, to the receiver of the action, which is in the predicate. So now we're putting all of our lessons together. Way back at the beginning, we talked about the subject part of the sentence and the predicate part of the sentence. Now, when we're talking about a transitive verb, you're taking an action that is done by the subject with the transitive verb, and that's passed to the predicate part of your sentence. And the word that is in the predicate part of the sentence that labels is called the object or the direct object. So you have the subject doing an action expressed by your action verb, and it's passing that action on to the receiver of the action, which is your object or your direct object. That means transitive. It passes the action on. Let's look at this example. The cat chased a moth. So cat is my subject. Chased is an action verb. And moth receives action of being chased. So chased is a transitive verb. It transfers that action on. Direct object is a noun or a pronoun that's in your predicate that completes the meaning of the action verb. So it is the one that receives that action. A direct object answers the question of who or what about your transitive verb. So to find a direct object, we talked about this a few weeks ago, but let's review it. To find a direct object in a sentence, you read your sentence and then you identify first the subject and then the verb, and you make sure that verb is an action verb. Once you know it's an action verb, you ask who or what. Your answer is going to be your direct object. Okay, let's look at this as an example. Jenny bought flowers at the market. So look at that. I'm going to analyze my sentence. Jenny is my subject. So I've done the first one. The second one, bought, is an action verb. So then I say who or Jenny bought what, and flowers is my answer. So flowers is my direct object. So let's look at these three sentences and let's talk through how we find the direct object. So the animal trainer fed the bears. So I look at that sentence and I'm going to analyze it. So I say trainer is my subject. Trainer did what? He fed. So fed is the verb. So trainer, subject, fed is my verb. Fed what? Bears. So bears is my direct object. The architect showed the plans of the room. So architect would be my subject. What did the architect do? Showed. So showed is my verb. Showed what? The plans. So plans is my direct object. The last one, the school bully kicked Joey. So I look at that and say, okay, bully is my subject. What did the bully do? Kicked. So kicked is my verb. Kicked who? Kicked Joey. So Joey is my direct object. Okay, so you can find those direct objects. You just need to go through the process and ask the questions that you need to ask. An indirect object. Now, not all sentences have indirect objects, but oftentimes when you have a sentence that has a direct object, they will also have an indirect object. An indirect object tells to whom or to what or for whom or for what an action is done. The important thing to remember, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, is that if a sentence has a direct object, it's going to fall between the verb and the object of your sentence. So your sentence order would be a subject, a verb, an indirect object, and then your object. So let's look at these two examples and see if we can figure this out. So Lydia sold Geraldo, Freddie, and me lemonade. So I'm going to analyze that sentence because I want to find my indirect object. So first I need to find my subject is Lydia. Lydia did what? She sold. So sold is my verb. Sold what? Sold lemonade. So lemonade is my direct object. Now remember your rule about indirect object. It has to fall between the verb and the direct object. So an answer to whom or for whom. So Lydia sold lemonade. Lemonade is my direct object. For whom? Well, for Geraldo, Freddie, and me. So in this sentence, your indirect objects are Geraldo, Freddie, me. Let's look at another example. Natalie knitted her friend a sweater. So I look at that. I find my subject, which is Natalie. My verb is knitted. Knitted what? A sweater. So sweater is my direct object. For whom or to whom? And it was for her friend. So friend is my indirect object. So see, you can figure these out. You just need to think through the process and go through the steps, and you'll get this. Now we've talked about transitive verbs, where that action of your verb passes from your subject to the direct object, which is in your predicate. Now an intransitive verb is where that action stops and it bounces back to the subject. It like ricochets back, okay? Because it doesn't pass to anything in the predicate. So an official definition of this is an intransitive verb expresses action or tells something about the subject without the action passing to a receiver or an object. Example, last Saturday we stayed outside. So I'm going to analyze this here. My subject is we. What did we do? Stayed. Stayed is my action verb. So who receives the action of stayed? Nobody does. It bounces back to the subject, so it's intransitive. After their long walk, the children ate quickly. I look at that and I think, okay, my subject is children. What did the children do? Ate. Ate what? Well, it doesn't say. The action stays with the children. It bounces back to the subject, so it's intransitive. So now transitive versus intransitive. Now sometimes you can have a verb that in one sentence will be transitive, while in another sentence it will be intransitive. So you have to take each sentence alone and analyze that sentence to determine how that verb is, whether it's intransitive or transitive. Example. Marcy studied her notes. Okay, my subject here is Marcy. Marcy did what? She studied, so that's my verb. Studied what? Her notes. So my first example, studied, the action of studied passes to the notes, so it's transitive. My second one, Marcy studied very late. Okay, my subject is still Marcy. My verb is still studied. But studied, what does the action pass to? Nothing. It stays, bounces back to Marcy. So this one would be intransitive. Let's look at another example. The poet wrote a sonnet. So the poet is my subject. Wrote is my verb. Wrote what? A sonnet. So the action of writing passes to the sonnet. So this one's transitive. Poet here is my subject. Wrote is still my verb. Wrote what? Wrote how. It answers how. It doesn't answer what. So the action stays with the poet. So in this case, it's intransitive. So now, transitive and intransitive verbs are a little bit hard, but you're going to work on them in your activity in Canvas. You're going to correct your own answers, evaluate your own responses, and be responsible for your own learning. Bring your grade in on Monday, along with the notes, and I'll give you the points for those. And then we'll do some exercises on Monday for transitive and intransitive verbs. We're working on this in DGPs too. But you're doing fabulous. This is probably one of the harder lessons, so good luck with it. I'll see you on Monday, and have a great weekend.